Hannah from Spiritual Tarot, and welcome to another episode of Enlightened Empaths. For those of you that have not watched my other videos, it's really just a series where I talk about being an empath and just kind of go into just more in depth on different topics related to intuition and to not get stuck in the negative aspects of it, because it can be a lot to go through, and it's nice to kind of get some advice from other people that have experienced the same thing. So today's video, I think I'm just going to talk about my story, how I kind of figured out that I was an empath and how I started healing myself, basically. And the first thing I want to say about this is that I really couldn't have done it without YouTube. So I discovered a bunch of videos where people like me or very different from me, however you want to look at it, were talking about their experiences of being an empath and what it was. And it really just kind of helped me find answers where I had never been able to find answers before, and I owe them so much. I want to thank each one and every one of them, and I kind of feel like my way of doing that is by making this video series, by contributing my voice, and to hopefully help someone else who is just starting on this journey and doesn't really know where to start. So I am just paying it forward. So to go on my own journey story, and the reason why I want to do that is because I really feel like it helps, especially for people who who are just in the beginning of their journey. Hearing other people's stories is like a great way to kind of to find yourself. At least it is for me. I feel like the more I listen to other people's experiences about their intuition and stuff, and the more that kind of becomes a part of the whole collective, all these stories, being told, it really just helps give momentum to the awakening that's happening in each person in the world. So tell your story, no matter how hard that is, or if you don't feel comfortable telling it to YouTube, which I totally understand, at least share it with friends or someone you trust, because talking about these things is the best way to begin healing. So, to make a long story short, I think I've always kind of known that I was an empath, but I just didn't know that there was a definition for it. I didn't know that being an empath was a thing. I knew from a very young age that spirit, and there was something more than just religion. I always considered myself more of a spiritual person than religious, and I think it's because I from an extremely young age, I'd have to say elementary school, I went to a very Catholic elementary school. We were just taught so many rules and that had to do with religion and who could get into heaven and who couldn't, and it just didn't make sense to me. And I kind of saw it as I kind of saw religion as this humanity's way of filtering something that can't be understood into something that could be understood. So that was always my belief. I always thought that the rules that different religions kind of put onto people were too constricting, and they weren't really what I believed. But at the same time, because I was empathic and I believe pretty psychic from a young age, I knew that there was some truth and validity um, to like the Catholic faith and Christian faith. Like when I walked into church, I could feel like the power, that there was a God. Like I prayed a lot, so I knew that there was some validity to it. I just didn't think that like our interpretation was really the end all be all. I was very open to the possibility that there was a lot that we didn't understand. And there were like snippets of that when I was growing up. I feel like uh, and a lot of that didn't come to fruition until later, but I do know when I was littler, like I had a very, what my sister called an overactive imagination, where I was very fearful at night of like ghosts and the dark. Um, and in a strange way, even though I was like sure, that I was sure that there was like spirit presences in our home growing up and all this stuff, the fact that and my sister kind of didn't really believe it, and then my mom was very like suppressive, like she's very like don't even talk about it, and to me that was like basically saying that I was right, because her fear and not wanting to even bring it up was kind of telling me like you're right, because if she hadn't like basically been like don't talk about it, it's scary, then I would have said, oh, that's not true. So um I don't think that being an empath really like clicked for me. Like I didn't really notice that it was affecting my life until high school and college, when I started developing like just more complicated relationships with other people. So my mom told me the other day when I was explaining to her like just some of the things that I've noticed about myself, like when I'm like, because I'm an empath, just how I kind of like process things. And one of the things I said was, I was like, I will literally like notice in an instant if there's someone around me who is upset. And now, as an adult, because I'm so quick to recognize it, I kind of, it's not that I get annoyed at the other person. It's like when I notice that they're upset, it's like instantly on my radar. And if they don't acknowledge it, the emotion, and they're just kind of like walking around with this like dark cloud over their head, I can like see the dark cloud, and I was like saying, I feel like the person is like raining on me. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, that dark cloud that's over your head, like you are raining on me right now. And like if they don't acknowledge it or bring it up to me, or they're kind of acting sad but like they're not saying anything is wrong, I will get very like not confrontational in a bad way, but I'll just kind of be like, I know you're upset, and like you need to tell me what's going on because you're making me crazy. And then a lot of times I'll just kind of be like, how do you know? And then then they'll tell me, and it'll just diffuse the whole like dark cloud energy that's around them. And it's like they don't mean to do it, and sometimes it'll be like so deep in their subconscious that like it's not usually too deep, because it's usually like they're upset about something but they don't want to bring it up, and I just will pick up on it so fast and be like, oh my gosh, like this person, you are literally like raining on my little parade right now. And I've noticed that the best way to just do it, to just, if it's someone that you know well, to just nip it in the bud and be like, hi, what's going on here? Like, why, like, why are you upset? And then they're like, oh, how do you know? And then I'll be like, please tell me, and then we'll be good to go. And then they do, and everything kind of diffuses, and it just like helps me. So I was telling her that, and she basically was just like, you have always been that way. Like when you were little, um, and you'd be on the playground and you were like, just able to walk. If any kid was crying or upset, like you instantly would just make a beeline over to them to try to comfort them. And she's like, I never really thought about it. It was just something that you always did. But, when you think about most little kids, they're like living in their own world. And so for me, it was like I always the second I like knew someone was hurt or upset, like the first thing I wanted to do was comfort them or hug them or tell them it was okay. And that's just always how I've been. My allergies always get like crazy when I'm not here, so don't mind me. Okay, I'm like running away from the sun over here. Okay, so um so when I was a teenager, I started noticing that the friendships that I developed um, were very one-sided. So it was, and I tended to kind of get in these like really like, which I think is common for teenagers, but I tended to get into like these really intense friendships where we were spending a bunch of time together with like where I was spending a bunch of time with one person, and I've always kind of been this way. It's weird, um, and I'll talk more about it because I don't know. It's something I'm still trying to learn about myself, and I'm 26 now, so there's a lot of things that I still don't know for sure. Um, when I was a teenager, I really developed these um, codependent relationships with friends and boyfriends or whatever, just with people in general, where we would be like inseparable. Oh, I get my coffee out of the shop, but it's okay. Mm. Mm. So I there was like a very codependent feel to it where I was, with the person all the time. And then what would start happening, and it happened with me with like a bunch of different people, is they would always talk to me about all of their problems and they would just unload on me. And it was like this, and like we were best friends and I like cared about these people, but it became so hard for me because I felt like every time I tried to talk about me and my problems, I wasn't being heard. And it was like the second I saw the person, they would want to, tell me everything that was happening in their life. And finally, like once or twice, I just kind of snapped, or I would just end up phasing out the person and not really giving them a reason, which, like, looking back on it, are mistakes that I've made. And, but it was because I was kind of just taking on so much emotion from other people and not realize, and I didn't know at the time how to process it and how to deal with it in a healthy way, and like how to set boundaries. Just because I was so young, this was starting at like 14 or 15. So I tended to have like a lot of like best friends who come in and out of my life. By the time I graduated from college, I had pretty much experienced that whole like cycle of friendship where it went from being like codependent to um, emotionally kind of destructive to me, and then where I would be like kind of distance myself for no reason or not give an explanation and kind of just ghost people. And that had happened to me a couple times. I had like gone through some falling outs with some best friends that I had just felt like had become very toxic in my life at times. And it just was like, it was really hard. It was like, it's always been really hard for me to like maintain friendships because for me, I'm like an all or nothing person. And I think that's like very typical of empaths. Like, um, so that whole time, and then when I got my first job, like I went through various phases of my life, like, living in college, like dealing with what it's like to kind of like survive on your own. I moved back home after college, got a job, was working full time, moved in with some friends, like all the normal 20, like when you're living in your 20s kind of thing. That I was basically like emotional smog that I was kind of taking on, and I didn't really know I was, because I still was an unawakened empath, basically. Like I just was sleeping and dealing with, you know, not only my shit of like growing up in being like a teenager and someone who's in their 20s, but also subconsciously kind of dealing with other people who are around me. And um, I think like when I was in high school, and this is kind of the point I wanted to make, that even though I didn't know that there was a word for being an empath, I knew that I was different, and I knew that I like had certain needs that most normal people didn't have. And I always kind of thought of it to myself that I was a mirror. So I always kind of like envisioned me and my personality as like this blank mirror. And I knew that I tended to reflect back um, whatever someone else was kind of, putting on to me. So that was always how I rationalized it to myself in my head when I was in high school and college. Like, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I just know that if, my boyfriend is upset or, you know, depressed or whatever, that I will be too. And I know that if my sister's mad at me, that I will be mad at her, even though I really don't like. My sister's one person that I'm close with, and I don't really like. I guess I do pick. I don't know. It's like weird. I guess I kind of. She's like one of those people. I'm just like, what's wrong, before it gets to that level. But so I really describe myself as like a mirror. I kind of felt like a little like kind of like a chameleon, like that my personality um, tended to kind of get overshadowed by other people's personalities, and I would tend to reflect like things that they did back onto them. Like I don't know why, it's just a way that I've always been. Like I just kind of like I said, I always kind of was like a mirror. So I knew that this was a thing, but I didn't know if it was bad or good. I just knew that if someone was unhappy, that there was no way I was gonna just be like that ray of sunshine that like made them happy again. Like I knew that I would be like kind of dragged down with them, and that was really the extent of my understanding of what was going on. So that was how I understood myself for the longest time, probably like 10 years. And I knew that it was like a real thing, and I knew that I tended to be attracted to people, both girls and boys, like friends and boyfriends, basically, um, who were going through very painful situations. And I just subconsciously like befriended them and wanted to alleviate this pain and take it on and like help them through it without kind of realizing what it was doing to me. So that was just unhealthy. And then I would be sitting there wondering later why I was so unhappy and depressed. And uh, I just kind of like not getting it, and just really kind of like thinking that I was depressed, even though I wasn't. And and I think there was times in my life where I have been kind of depressed, but now looking back on it and understanding the whole empath thing, I part of me questions how much of it was me and how much of it was just the situation I was in. And I think some of it was my own, but I also feel like it kind of was the reason why it was so bad was because I was not understanding the root cause of it. Like the weird thing was is that I had heard the word empath before. Like I think when I was in college or something, like I'd heard it before, hadn't really looked into it, and had like for some reason I just hadn't like really looked into what it meant. And I think I started identifying myself with that word without truly like looking into it and like doing my research like in depth. But I kind of was like, okay, I like that word. I heard it. It makes sense. Whatever. it wasn't until I decided to learn how to read tarot cards, which is really only about like, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, that I started doing research on intuition. So I have talked about this before and I'll probably talk about it again, but I really believed for the longest time, I like had this like desire to learn how to read tarot cards, and yet I didn't learn because I thought that you had to be like a full blown psychic to read them. I was like, okay, well, I really want to learn how to read tarot cards, but I can't because I don't, you know, see ghosts every day and I'm not super psychic, whatever. And I just kind of was like, well, I guess I don't fit the bill, which is totally not true. So when I started like watching these YouTube videos when people were like, oh, this is, discovering your intuition, developing your intuition. And like when I learned that it was a skill that anyone could develop and learn and that everyone has intuition, it like opened up this whole new world of possibilities to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how did I not know that I could do this? Like I wish I had learned this before, whatever. So I started meditating and just trying out, like, I got some tarot cards. I was listening to a lot of podcasts, watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I just kind of kept happening upon the whole, like, empath discussion. And I was like, wow, this is me. And it felt so good to finally have a definition for something that I had been experiencing my whole life and that I had never been able to define or really understand, but that had been affecting me for so long. And once I did that, everything kind of clicked into place. Like, I feel like I was able to access my intuition and get it under control. I was able to get rid of a lot of the negativity that I was carrying around with me and picking up from other people. And, the knowledge is really power. I feel like that is really what helped me on my journey. So I I always say like YouTube was like falling down the rabbit hole because I literally was just watching videos on like how to read tarot cards, and then all of a sudden I'm like watching like, Gaia videos and videos about aliens and other dimensions. And if you had asked me, before all of this, like if I believed in any of it, I would have told you no. Like I said, I identify myself as a spiritual person, but I didn't. I thought that there was limitations, and when I learned to kind of be open to believing anything and everything, this whole new like understanding kind of was given to me. So towards the end, I really feel like the whole discovery kind of happened at like a very like like the timing was exactly what it needed to be, because I was getting to the point where it was making me absolutely insane. Like I honestly don't think I could have continued like living my life the way that I was. And so I don't want to say it was rock bottom because it was not by any means, but I do feel like I had gotten to that point where like had been living, 24 years of total exhaustion and not understanding and feeling like I was just in the dark. And the way I was coping with dealing with this kind of stuff was just so destructive and unhealthy that it couldn't have gone on for very much longer. And I'm sure that there's tons of people out there that have lived their whole lives unhealthy and unhappy, but I I found tarot and I found the answers that I needed at the time when I really needed them most. And I feel like I probably wouldn't have believed it if it hadn't been for how desperate I was for an answer. Like I just wanted an answer. Like I didn't know why I was just like every day was like emotionally draining for me. Every day was just a struggle. And uh I had gone through certain phases of my life of being very paranoid, of having really bad anxiety. The paranoia was probably the worst thing, and it was something that I never really like talked about to anyone. So they didn't even know that I really had it. Like if you asked my family, they probably didn't even notice it. But I didn't like, being alone in my house for obvious reasons. Like I told you, I just felt like there was a presence always. And so my coping was pretty much just like drinking, and just surrounding myself with people at all times. And for an empath, that's like the worst thing you can do because you need alone time to like recenter yourself and kind of keep everyone's like shit away from you. But I just was like so deep in the like just needing to like be able to get up and survive every day, that was what I needed to do. Like I would drink wine to fall asleep, or like go out to happy hours or go out every night, and it just was this perpetual like exhaustion, just not only from like partying a lot and drinking, but also just because I wasn't giving myself any alone time. I felt like this need, like this keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, where I just like needed to always be like wherever everyone else was, like wherever the party was, whatever was going on, like needed to be in the middle of the friend group at all times, even though like that's not really me. Like I'm the kind of person that needs to be alone. Um, and so I just exhausted myself. I really did. And by the end, like I just have, it was probably like 2 winters ago, I had gotten to the point where not only was I like physically exhausted from working a ton and not necessarily being happy all the time with what I was doing, not really sure what I was going to do next, but also a huge part of it was that I felt guilty about how much I was like going out, just because I felt like I didn't have a hobby outside of work. Like I literally felt like I was going to work all day, working so much, coming home and just drinking and partying, and there was nothing else. I didn't have a hobby, and it just was like I can't. I need to find a passion. I need to find something else to do besides, just wasting away my life. So, and then when I kind of started realizing that I needed a hobby, or just something that I could kind of dedicate my life to besides working, um, my like empathic side just kind of went into overdrive. And I don't know if that was really like, you know, the universe telling me like this is what your passion's gonna be. But I was picking up on everything. Like, oh my gosh. I was picking up on my friends when they would be anxious, or if they had like some kind of anxiety attack or anything. I didn't even have to be near them. Like, it would hit me like a freaking freight train. Like, there were so many times where I'd just be sitting like in my room doing my makeup, about to go meet up with some friends, and all of a sudden, like I would have the physical symptoms of a panic attack. I would be sitting in my room and all of a sudden I'd be sweating, and like when you have anxiety sweat, it's like different. Um, so I'd be like sweating, I'd be shaking, my hands would be shaking. Um, I would feel dizzy, and I would just be like, what is going on? And so sometimes, I didn't know, I never, like, the first few times, I didn't know, like, what exactly was going on. So I would just try to, uh, I wouldn't put two and two together until later. So I would just kind of continue with whatever I was doing. Like, I'd be like, oh my God, why is my body, like, freaking out right now? And I would, sometimes have a glass of wine or a beer to kind of like calm myself down. And then when the jitters would subside, then like the next day I would, talk to my friend or whatever and be like, and they would maybe say something like, oh, I was so nervous yesterday. And I'd be like, who are you? And they were like, yeah. And I'd be like, what time? And they'd tell me, and I'd be like, okay, like, and they'd say, I was like so nervous about this, and this coming up, and I just was like freaking out, and I'd just be like, I know, I literally felt it. So that happened to me a couple times, and that was when I first was kind of like learning about what an empath was. So it just like hit me like, a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that like to the minute I, would be 30 miles, 100 miles away from this person or something, just doing something that literally it made no sense that I was like having these kind of physical symptoms. And then I would like text them or call them and be like, hey, what's going on? And sure enough, they were going through this. So that was pretty crazy. And I had to kind of learn really quickly how to deal with it because, like I said, it was literally making me insane. It was so hard for me to tell what was mine and what wasn't. Like I was learning, like when those panic attack situations happened. By that point, I had kind of like because it didn't make any sense. I was kind of learning how to pinpoint if it wasn't mine, but I still wasn't very good at dealing with it. So went through it and I like was researching how to kind of deal with all of these symptoms. And then they just slowly started subsiding once I kind of did my research and was able to just let go of everything. So that's actually going to be in my next video. I'm going to talk about what like the best tools for an empath to use to protect themselves and what I did. So thank you so much for watching. Uh, and I hope that all the enlightened empaths out there learned something today. So I will see you in my next video.